The crown of the Benin Kingdom is far more than an ornamental piece of jewelry. It is a potent symbol of divine authority, spiritual power, and cultural identity. Its significance is deeply woven into the fabric of Edo cosmology, where every element carries profound meaning tied to the kingdom's history, religion, and social structure. While the specific physical form of the real crown remains elusive in many institutional records, its symbolic essence is well documented through oral traditions, historical accounts, and the iconography present in other royal artifacts. The most frequently described form of this regalia is a coral bead crown, an insignia introduced by the legendary Oba Ewuare I in the 15th century. This crown was not merely an accessory but a central component of the Oba's, king's, persona, used in the most critical ceremonies to legitimize his rule and connect him to the divine realm. The primary material of the crown, coral beads, is imbued with immense symbolic weight. In Edo philosophy, coral is an imported luxury, a direct link between the earthly kingdom and the sea god Olokun, who is the source of all wealth and prosperity. 38-39. The deep orange-red color of the coral signifies life, vitality, and power, and when polished, it would have gleamed in the sunlight, creating a visible manifestation of the Oba's godlike status. This beaded regalia conferred a mystical power upon the wearer. Proclamations or even curses made by the Oba while holding coral were believed to possess supernatural efficacy. The crown was part of a larger ensemble of coral-adorned attire, including a tunic and skirts, collectively known as the Oral Regalia, which gave the Oba a radiant, almost celestial appearance. This elaborate costume, worn during coronation, Uji-era Oba, and the annual Igu festival, served to reinforce the Oba's position as the intermediary between the human world and the spirit world, particularly that of Olokun. Beyond coral, other materials associated with the monarchy carry distinct symbolic meanings. Ivory represents the Oba's strength, longevity, and purity, while brass, often mistakenly called bronze, symbolizes the permanence and continuity of kingship itself due to its resistance to corrosion. These materials are not randomly chosen but are part of a sophisticated symbolic language expressed through art and ritual. For instance, the leopard motif, representing royal power and ferocity, appears on royal paraphernalia, referencing a historical practice where the Oba would parade tame leopards in chains. Similarly, the mudfish symbolizes the Oba's unique ability to navigate between the mortal world and the spirit world of Olokun, reflecting his dual role as both a political and spiritual leader. Commemorative bronze heads, cast in copper alloy and placed on ancestral altars, honor deceased Obas and serve as a permanent record of lineage, legitimizing the succession of each new ruler. These artistic traditions, produced by specialized guilds like the Igunaramwan, brasscasters, and Igbasamwan, carvers, were integral to maintaining the mystique and authority of the monarchy. The creation and use of these objects were governed by strict protocols and a high degree of secrecy, with some elements of the rituals known only to those fluent in the Old Bini language. The head itself is considered the seat of destiny, judgment, intelligence, and leadership in Edo philosophy. Therefore, the crown, as the ultimate symbol of the head's authority, was central to the kingdom's functioning. Its looting in 1897 was thus not just a theft of art but a deliberate act of desecration aimed at severing the Oba's connection to his spiritual power and undermining the very foundation of the Benin state.
The absence of the physical crown from many museum collections today may reflect this understanding. Its symbolic power makes its return essential for the restoration of the kingdom's cultural and spiritual wholeness, a concept poignantly captured in the words of former Oba Ewuare I, who described the looted artifacts as pages torn off from the book of a people's life history. The continued ceremonial use of modern regalia by the current Oba Ewuare I Ewuare II, demonstrates the resilience of the tradition, but the symbolic void left by the crown's absence remains a powerful testament to the enduring impact of the 1897 expedition.
The looting of the Benin Kingdom's treasures, including the crown and other royal regalia, was not an isolated event but the culmination of escalating tensions between the Edo people and British colonial interests. The Punitive Expedition of February 1897 was a meticulously planned military campaign designed to achieve multiple objectives: the destruction of the Benin monarchy, the annexation of its territory into the British Empire, and the acquisition of immense wealth through the seizure of the kingdom's priceless cultural patrimony. The expedition was led by Sir Harry Rawson, with a force of approximately 1,200 naval soldiers and 5,000 colonial troops, who invaded the sovereign territory of the Edo Kingdom. The pretext for the invasion was the ambush and massacre of a British-led party that had been sent to demand reparations for the killing of British officials in 1890. However, contemporary scholarship suggests that the British accounts of widespread human sacrifice and enslavement in Benin, which were used to justify the intervention, were likely exaggerated to create a moral case for war. Once in Benin City, the British forces executed a systematic campaign of destruction and plunder. They burned the city, destroyed the Oba's palace, and looted an estimated between 3,000 and 10,000 cultural objects. The scale of the looting was staggering, encompassing everything from commemorative bronze plaques and carved ivory works to sacred items from ancestral shrines and the personal regalia of the Oba himself. This act was carried out under the banner of spoils of war, with the proceeds from the subsequent auctions intended to cover the costs of the expedition. The looted objects were then dispersed globally. A significant portion went to the British Museum, with other major collections forming in Germany, France, Austria, and the United States. The consequences for the Benin people were catastrophic. The reigning Oba, Oba Ewuare I, surrendered and was deposed, subsequently exiled to Calabar where he died. His son, Akinzuwa II, was crowned in, but under British supervision, marking a stark reduction in the monarch's political and spiritual power compared to his predecessors. The destruction of the palace and its vast collection of artworks was a direct assault on the kingdom's cultural memory and identity. The looting severed the tangible links to the past, disrupting the continuity of royal art production for decades. It was an act of cultural genocide, intended to erase the history and legitimacy of the Benin monarchy. The British Museum, one of the primary beneficiaries of this looting, has since acknowledged the violent context of its acquisition. Yet it continues to hold over 900 Benin objects and has resisted permanent repatriation requests, citing legal restrictions like the British Museum Act of 1963. This institutional stance perpetuates the colonial power dynamic, treating the stolen heritage of another people as a permanent exhibit rather than as a vital part of a living culture seeking to reclaim its history. The expedition stands as a stark example of how imperial ambition and greed can lead to the wholesale destruction of a civilization's artistic and spiritual heart. Following the sacking of Benin City in 1897, the looted artifacts embarked on a global dispersal that would see them end up in museums, private collections, and dealer inventories across Europe and North America. This process was facilitated by the Admiralty auction held in London in May 1897, which sold much of the initial war booty to recoup expedition costs. This single event marked the first major step in the international journey of the Benin bronzes and other royal treasures. The distribution was uneven, with a significant concentration of pieces going to the United Kingdom. The British Museum alone received at least 300 plaques shortly after the expedition, followed by further acquisitions through donations and purchases from members of the raiding party and prominent collectors like Harry Beasley, William Oldham, and Sir Henry Wellcome. Other institutions in the UK, such as the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford and National Museum Scotland in Edinburgh, also acquired substantial holdings from the raid. Beyond Britain, Germany became a major repository for the loot, largely through the efforts of dealers like William Downing Webster, who supplied German museums such as the Ethnologists Museum in Berlin, the Welt Museum in Vienna, and the Grassi Museum für Völkerkunde in Leipzig. Major American institutions also secured important collections. The Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York holds 160 Benin objects. Cambridge University's Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology has 160, and the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, holds 79 works from Nigeria, including 36 from the 1897 expedition. The Smithsonian's National Museum of African Art transferred 29 confirmed looted Benin bronzes to Nigeria in 2022, marking a significant step in the restitution movement. The sheer number of objects, estimated to be over 5,000, was so vast that a comprehensive digital project, Digital Benin, has been launched to map their locations across 136 institutions in 20 countries. This dispersal created a complex web of ownership and provenance that complicates modern restitution efforts. Many objects entered the market through dealers like W.D. Webster, whose business records could potentially provide crucial information about their early post-looting history. Webster purchased vast quantities of Benin art directly from returning British soldiers and operated a prolific trade, issuing detailed catalogs and selling his entire collection in a 5-day auction in 1904. His dealings extended to museums in various countries, making him a key figure in the globalization of the looted heritage. Some artifacts were also returned through more indirect means, such as a descendant of a British looter donating pieces to the Benin royal family. The table below provides a snapshot of the major institutional holdings of Benin artifacts mentioned in the provided sources. The existence of these scattered collections highlights the challenge of achieving a comprehensive return. Repatriation is no longer a simple matter of asking one institution to return a single object. It involves navigating a labyrinth of national laws, museum policies, private ownership claims, and the complex histories embedded within the artifacts themselves. The ongoing work of provenance research and international dialogue, exemplified by groups like the Benin Dialogue Group, seeks to untangle this web, but the path to reunifying the kingdom's cultural heritage is long and fraught with legal and political obstacles. In the aftermath of the 1897 Benin Expedition, a vibrant and unregulated market emerged for the looted artifacts, transforming what were once sacred royal treasures into commodities for ethnographic collectors and museums. At the center of this illicit trade was a single, highly influential figure, William Downing Webster, 1868 to 1913. He was not merely a trader but the primary facilitator who orchestrated the flow of thousands of Benin objects from the hands of British soldiers back into the European and American art markets. Between 1897 and 1904, Webster effectively acted as the official dealer for the spoils of the Benin expedition, handling most of the artifacts that entered the continent during this period. His operation was highly organized, built on a network that reached into the very ranks of the military personnel who participated in the raid. Webster's business model was efficient and aggressive. He traveled across Britain, purchasing material directly from the returning soldiers who had kept souvenirs from the looting. To lend an air of legitimacy to his enterprise, he issued 31 illustrated catalogs between 1895 and 1901, showcasing his wares with photographs and sketches. These catalogs were instrumental in marketing the objects to a wide audience of private collectors and curators in both Britain and abroad. His business records, which include stock books, cash books, and letter books, provide a chillingly detailed account of the commercialization of this cultural catastrophe. These documents, now held by the Museum of New Zealand Te Papatongawa, contain handwritten inventories and financial records that could identify the acquisition and sale of specific items, potentially including the real crown if it passed through his hands. The prices listed in his catalogs reveal the mercantile logic behind the looting. A simple brass bracelet might be priced at 10 shillings, while a large commemorative head could fetch 40 pounds, equivalent to tens of thousands of dollars in modern value. His most significant transaction was the sale of his entire personal collection in a major 5-day auction at Stevens Auction Rooms in London in November 1904. This event was a landmark moment, bringing a massive quantity of curated Benin art to the attention of the elite collecting world. The collection was described by one catalog as probably the finest outside any museum, underscoring the quality and significance of the looted material. The buyers were a mix of major museums, such as the Grassi Museum in Leipzig, and wealthy private individuals. Through this auction and his ongoing sales, Webster cemented the Benin bronzes as a desirable category in the fine arts market and ensured their permanent dispersal across the globe. His influence was so profound that his name became synonymous with the post-expedition market. Even the British Museum, which has no record of direct purchases from him, acknowledges that some of its own Benin holdings were once part of his collection. The story of W.D. Webster is therefore inseparable from the story of the artifacts themselves. He was the catalyst that transformed a localized act of war into a global cultural crisis, and his archives represent one of the few remaining opportunities to trace the specific journeys of these stolen objects. The latter half of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st have witnessed a dramatic shift in the discourse surrounding the Benin artifacts. What was once seen as a permanent transfer of cultural property is now increasingly recognized as a wrongful act of theft and cultural dispossession. This change is driven by sustained advocacy from Nigerian stakeholders, including the Oba of Benin and the country's government, and a growing international consensus that the era of colonial-era acquisitions without consent must end. The Nigerian government formally requested the return of its antiquities from the British Museum in October 2021, a move that prompted a public statement from the museum acknowledging the deeply disturbing nature of the expedition's context but stopping short of committing to repatriation. This response reflects the core dilemma facing Western museums, the conflict between their legal obligations and the ethical imperative of restitution. Despite the reluctance of some major institutions, significant progress has been made. France, under President Emmanuel Macron, pledged in 2018 to return African artifacts taken during colonial times and has since begun the process, setting a powerful precedent. Germany has been a leader in this movement, returning 1,125 artifacts to Nigeria in two major tranches, in 2020 and again in August 2022, which included 512 of the most significant Benin objects and was the largest return of its kind. The Musée du Quai Branly in Paris, the University of Aberdeen in Scotland, and Jesus College, Cambridge have also successfully completed returns in recent years. The Smithsonian's National Museum of African Art's decision to transfer 29 Benin bronzes to Nigeria in 2022 was a landmark moment, marking the first return under its new ethical returns policy and highlighting a generational shift in American museum ethics. These successes, however, stand in contrast to the fate of the artifacts held by the British Museum. The museum maintains a policy of loaning objects rather than returning them permanently, citing the restrictive British Museum Act of 1963, which states that objects acquired before 1963 cannot be deaccessioned. 2.8. This legal barrier has become a focal point of contention, with critics arguing that it is being used as a shield to avoid confronting the moral and historical wrongness of the 1897 looting. Proposals to loan the artifacts to a new museum in Benin City, such as the Edo Museum of West African Art, have been criticized as a continuation of a colonial dynamic where Western institutions retain control over the object's destiny. Regarding the specific fate of the real crown, the available evidence points to a combination of factors contributing to its current unknown status. It is overwhelmingly probable that the crown was among the royal regalia seized during the 1897 looting. Its primary material, organic coral beads, makes it far less durable and valuable in a purely commercial sense than the bronze and brass objects that dominate museum collections. Organic materials decay over time, and it is conceivable that the original crown perished. Alternatively, it may never have entered the main dealer networks like Webster's, which focused on more durable and marketable items. Another possibility is that it remains in private hands, a prized and secret family heirloom, hidden away from public view and provenance research. Regardless of its physical condition, the crown's symbolic importance endures. Poets and artists continue to reference it as a symbol of what was lost. The search for it is part of a larger quest for the reclamation of a people's history. As Prince Gregory Akinzuwa emphasized, the looted art is integral to Benin's historical identity, and until such objects are returned, that identity will remain fragmented. The unresolved fate of the crown encapsulates the unfinished business of decolonization and the deep-seated struggle for cultural justice.